Hello, dreamers, and welcome to Dreaming Isle. I'm here to guide you into a calm and magical place tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps bring more dreamers to our little corner of the stars. And if you'd like, share in the comments, what's the world outside your window like right now? Now, find your cozy spot. Let go of the day, and let the story begin. The wind had a peculiar way of curling around the cliffs of Lornwind, as if it whispered secrets to the stones. I heard them sometimes, not with my ears, but in the stillness that followed each gust. That morning, I awoke to the sound of nothing, a silence so complete it made my heart skip. Even the waves below had forgotten to crash. I lived alone in a crooked little cottage carved into the cliffside, where moss grew on the inside walls and lanterns swayed in the dark like sleepy fireflies. My name is Corwin, and I was the last keeper of the Windlight. At least, that's what the villagers used to call me before they vanished one by one. The Windlight was an old candle, no taller than a child's thumb, sitting in a rusted sconce above my hearth. It had burned without pause for 77 years. Through storms and war, through grief and snow and silence, it burned. No wax dripped, no wick shrank, just a steady, amber flame that never flickered, as if the wind itself dared not touch it. That morning, however, I noticed something strange. The flame was moving, not flickering, dancing. I stepped closer, holding my breath. The shadows on the stone walls swirled in unfamiliar patterns. And then the candle did something it had never done before. It hissed. A thin line of blue smoke curled up from its heart. I leaned in, and the smoke coiled toward me like a serpent. Before I could move, it touched my forehead. And I remembered everything. Not just my own life, but lives I had never lived. A forest of glass. A girl made of snow. A city that floated on strings. Then the candle spoke. Its voice was older than thunder, gentler than fog. It is time, Corwin. Time for what? I didn't yet know. But I packed my bag with bread and ink, shut the door, and followed the smoke into the rising dawn. The smoke led me not along the usual cliff trail, but down a path I didn't remember existing. It cut through the bramble like it had always been there, only now revealing itself because I'd earned the right to see it. The ground beneath my boots was soft with moss and shimmered faintly, like dew catching moonlight at midday. I walked without question. The candle's message lingered in my bones like an echo. It is time. Time for what? I still didn't know. But something inside me had shifted the moment the smoke touched my brow. I could feel old parts of myself awakening, memories that weren't memories, feelings too large for just one life. As I walked, the forest leaned in around me. Trees with bark like woven copper, leaves shaped like runes. Birds I didn't recognize hummed lullabies in minor chords. A small creature with fur the color of fog trotted alongside me for a while, then vanished into a knot of roots without a sound. Even the air felt different, thick with purpose, like the whole world was holding its breath. After some time, minutes, hours, I couldn't tell, I reached a clearing where the smoke halted, coiling lazily in midair. At its center stood a wooden post, crooked and ancient. Nailed to it was a sign I could barely read. This way to the library that forgot itself. The library. I knew the name, though I had never been there. Or had I? My fingers twitched as if they remembered holding a certain leather-bound tome. I took a step forward, and the smoke darted ahead like a ribbon caught on the wind. I followed it down a narrow trail flanked by lanterns that lit themselves as I passed. The forest grew dimmer, quieter, as though I were descending into a place forgotten by sunlight. The path was waiting, not just for anyone, for me. And in the distance, faint as a dream, a bell rang once, calling me home. The bell rang again, softer this time, like a whisper beneath the soil. I paused beneath an archway of gnarled branches. The trail had become narrower still, the forest denser and darker, yet I was not afraid. The air thrummed with a kind of knowing, a hushed reverence I could feel in my lungs. The smoke drifted lower, gliding just above the ground now, curling between the exposed roots like it was guiding me through a riddle. I passed stones carved with symbols I couldn't read, though they stirred a forgotten language in my mind. One looked like an open eye, another like a rising moon bound in chains. There was a hush here, not empty, but full, like the forest listened as much as it spoke. Eventually, the trail opened into a hollow where roots of great trees sank deep into the earth like ancient fingers. And in the center of that hollow, there stood a bell, not hanging from a frame, nor suspended by rope, just standing upright in the soil, as though the ground itself had grown it. It was made of dull bronze, patterned with ivy and stars. No clapper hung inside it. No wind blew through to stir it, but it rang nonetheless, low, clear, and impossibly gentle, vibrating through the marrow of my bones. The smoke vanished. I approached the bell, my hand outstretched. The moment I touched its cold surface, images burst behind my eyes. A castle buried in sand, a woman with wings of fire, a door in the sky that could only be opened by silence. And then, the bell rang one final time, and a door of root and bark appeared behind it. The door pulsed like a heartbeat, waiting. I stepped through. The air changed. It smelled of parchment and salt. The walls were formed of branches twisted into shelves, each filled with books that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The library that forgot itself had remembered me, and now it began to wake. The door closed behind me without a sound. I stood at the threshold of a library that pulsed like something alive. Shelves arched like rib cages overhead, winding into spirals that defied sense. Books floated gently from place to place, as if sorting themselves by mood rather than alphabet. Candles drifted through the air in orbits of slow, golden grace, each flame whispering in languages I almost understood. I stepped forward and the floor adjusted beneath me, not like wood creaking under weight, but more like a memory remembering how to support me. That's when I saw the librarian. Or rather, I saw the space where the librarian should have been. They stood at the far end of the hall, tall and still. Their body was draped in robes stitched from shadows and starlight, folds flickering between worlds. But where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, shimmering void. Not frightening, just unfinished, like a thought not yet spoken. They raised a hand. A book flew from a nearby shelf and hovered between us, its cover bound in violet moss, its pages sealed by a clasp of silver shaped like a spiral. Without a word, the librarian beckoned. I approached slowly, reverently. The book trembled, the clasp clicked open, and a wind rushed from its pages, carrying the smell of storm-tossed cliffs and ink spilled on old parchment. The pages turned themselves, faster than my eyes could follow, until they stopped blank. But as I looked, letters began to form in my own handwriting. The story begins again. The candle remembers. The bell has rung. The gate waits. I looked up. The librarian pointed to a spiral staircase descending into shadow. A whisper slipped into my ear, not a voice, but a feeling. Below lies the first forgotten. You must find what was lost. I nodded, heart steady. The library had given me a task. I clutched the book, now warm in my hands, and stepped onto the first stair, down into the dark, down where memory sleeps. The stairs wound downward in impossible ways, turning tighter with every step. Sometimes they corkscrewed. Sometimes they folded into themselves. At one point, I passed a window showing a night sky with two moons, neither of which belonged to the world I knew. Yet somehow, I never felt lost. The book floated beside me now, flipping its own pages occasionally, like it was trying to remember something it hadn't written yet. Its mossy cover left faint green prints on my fingertips. The ink on its pages shimmered faintly with every heartbeat. Eventually, I reached a landing. It opened into a vast chamber, dome-shaped and lit by a strange, sourceless glow. The walls were etched with thousands, no, millions of names. Names I could almost pronounce, almost remember. They were scratched into the stone with care, each one unfinished. No surname, no title. Just fragments. Some names blinked softly, like they were trying to wake. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. Upon it rested a single name, clear and complete. Talmir. The moment I read it aloud, the stone beneath my feet rippled. Wind, not of air, but of thought, rushed through the chamber, stirring the names on the wall like leaves in a storm. And then I heard a sound. Not a voice, not quite. More like the moment between thunder and its echo. You have remembered the first. I looked around, but the chamber held only silence. My book began to glow faintly, and the name Talmere appeared on its open page, etched in silver. Another page turned on its own. To restore the flame, you must find them all. I swallowed hard. All the forgotten names? All the memories buried in this impossible place? Before I could ask, the chamber door opened on its own, revealing a long hallway paved with mirrors. Each mirror shimmered faintly, reflecting not just me, but possibilities of me. Some smiling, some afraid, one weeping. I stepped forward, clutching the book. One name down, countless to go. Stepped into the corridor, and the sound of my boots against the floor changed. No longer stone and glass. The mirrors beneath me reflected the ceiling, which was also mirrored. It felt as though I walked a tightrope between two endless skies. The mirrors on either side shimmered faintly, each one taller than a door and wider than a bookshelf. They didn't reflect me exactly, not just me. Each one showed a version of myself shaped by different choices, like memories from lives I hadn't lived. In one, I wore armor of ice, standing on a battlefield under a crimson sun. In another, I wore a crown of woven seaweed and sat atop a throne of coral, speaking to whales in a tongue I somehow understood. Each reflection held my gaze for only a moment before vanishing into a soft shimmer, as if the corridor didn't want me to linger too long in what might have been. Then came a mirror that didn't shimmer. It stood still, silent, holding an image I recognized as this life, my life. The one where I lived in the cliffside cottage with the undying candle. The one where I had never left. I was older in the reflection. Lonely. Smaller. The flame of the Windlight was nearly out. I reached toward the glass, but the image cracked. A single fracture spread from fingertip to toe, and in its wake, the mirror darkened, turning from reflection to door. The book beside me flared with a faint violet light. A page turned. The words read, "Step through, and the memory becomes yours." I didn't hesitate. The mirror parted like smoke, and I stepped inside. At first, I felt nothing. Then the world blinked, and I was standing at my old hearth, watching myself grow old and weary beside the eternal candle. I felt the ache in my bones, the weight of solitude. And then, like turning a page, I let it go. I stepped back through the mirror, the memory now tucked inside me. Another name appeared in the book. Brain. 2 names now. The book pulsed once in approval. The corridor continued. The corridor of mirrors narrowed, folding in on itself like a closing flower, until finally, I emerged into a small chamber lit by a single floating orb of amber light. The walls here were made of paper, thick parchment stretched and stitched into strange curves, covered in sprawling lines of living ink. Yes, living. The ink moved. It slithered and curled, reshaping its strokes as though rethinking a sentence mid-thought. Some symbols resembled letters, but most were wild, half-formed, like the dreams of a language not yet spoken. In the center of the room sat a shallow bowl made of obsidian, filled with ink black as starless night. As I approached, the book beside me grew heavy. Its pages fluttered madly, then stopped on a blank sheet. A thin silver quill formed in the air beside it and floated toward me, tip glinting like a blade. Another whisper filled my mind, not a voice, not quite, but a shape of thought. Write what you remember, even if you've never known it. I didn't hesitate. I dipped the quill into the bowl and began to write, not in my own words, but in symbols I didn't recognize, though they flowed from me as if I'd written them in another life. Curves and points, dots like falling rain, loops shaped like sleeping eyes. The ink hissed softly as it met the page. When I finished, the book snapped shut, and the chamber pulsed with sudden warmth. From the bowl of ink, a figure rose. Formless at first, only shadow, then shape. A young woman with curls of ink for hair and eyes made of moving script. She looked at me with a smile that seemed centuries old. "Corwin," she said, her voice like pages turning. I am Miran. You remembered me. My breath caught. The name shimmered in the air before settling into the book's open page. Miran. 3 now. Her form began to dissolve back into words, drifting across the walls like falling leaves. Keep going, she whispered. We are all waiting. And then she was gone. The book turned another page. The path ahead appeared, newly written, and I followed it. The path written by Miran's fading ink led me to a door that wasn't there until I noticed it. It looked like part of the wall, blank parchment framed in quiet wood, but as I stepped closer, it softened like silk, rippling at my touch. I pressed through, and the world changed again. The room beyond had no ceiling, no walls, just space. A pale blue void stretched in all directions, filled with the sound of ticking. Hundreds of clocks floated in the air. Some were enormous, their brass gears as wide as wagon wheels. Others were no larger than pocket watches, ticking like beetle wings. None were the same, and none agreed on the time. Some ran forward, some backward. One ticked in steady silence while its hands spun in wild circles. In the center of it all was a chair. A man sat upon it, bent and motionless, wrapped in robes stitched from clock hands and ribbons of dusk. His head was bowed, resting on a cane carved from what looked like frozen sand. As I approached, his eyes opened. They were full of stars, real stars, shifting slowly like constellations in a midnight sky. You're late, he said without malice. I don't know what time it is, I replied honestly. He nodded. Then you're right on time. The book beside me opened on its own. A page turned, revealing the shape of an hourglass drawn in black ink. Do you remember me? He asked, leaning forward slightly. I was the keeper of Wind, before you were the keeper of the Windlight. We took turns, once. I searched my memory. A faint feeling stirred, of sunsets paused mid-fall, of years measured not in numbers, but in stories. I nodded slowly. His face relaxed, and he handed me the cane. Time stopped listening to me, he whispered. Perhaps it will listen to you now. The cane pulsed once in my hand, then turned into silver sand and vanished. His name appeared in the book without my writing it. Auro, for names. And still the clocks ticked on, uncaring. The room melted into mist. The mist faded slowly, revealing a narrow bridge suspended in nothing. There was no sky, no ground. Just the bridge, made of ink and parchment, held together by the faint shimmer of possibility. Each step I took left a glowing footprint behind, which vanished seconds later as though erased by an unseen hand. The book floated beside me again, pages calm now, as if it too was waiting to see what came next. At the center of the bridge stood a desk. Upon it lay a massive scroll, curled at the edges like a sleeping creature. Quills hovered nearby, suspended in midair, each one dripping ink that never fell. The scroll was blank, at least at first. When I stepped closer, a single dot appeared on the parchment. It pulsed once. Then lines began to spread outward from the dot, curving, branching, looping, forming paths, valleys, towers, and names. Entire cities unfurled before my eyes. Forests bloomed in black and gray. Seas shimmered in soft graphite swirls. I watched the map draw itself with a breathless sense of wonder. At the heart of the growing map was a tower. My tower. The cliffside cottage where the Windlight still burned. And around it, more dots pulsed to life. Places I had never seen but now knew intimately. The library that forgot itself, the Bell-Root Hollow, the Hall of Unfinished Names, the Mirror Corridor, and beyond those, many more. The map shimmered, and then a hand appeared beside it. Thin, delicate, made of shifting ink. The hand pointed to one of the dots. Valhalla. The words surfaced in my mind with weight. A place once real, then forgotten. A city swallowed by silence. The book turned its page, revealing the word again. Valhalla, written in my hand. The hand of ink touched the scroll, and from the marked point, a new path formed. A road of memory. The hand vanished, and I knew the next step. I walked forward, and the bridge unrolled beneath me, writing itself as I went. The road that led to Valhalla shimmered like a ribbon of fog laid across starlight. It wound downward through memories not quite mine, visions that whispered through the trees I passed, lullabies sung by hollow voices, lanterns flickering above empty streets, and a great clock tower caught in the moment before midnight. As I walked, the world grew quieter. Even my own footsteps softened, until I wasn't certain whether I was walking or simply remembering the act of it. The book hovered close to my side, its cover warm. It didn't open. It didn't need to. Valhalla revealed itself not suddenly, but gradually, like a dream forming just before waking. It was a city of stillness. Stone streets wound between buildings that leaned like they were listening. Windows stood open with curtains that didn't move. Fountains flowed in reverse. Not a single soul walked the roads, yet the city wasn't dead. It was asleep. Above all this rose the great clock tower, fractured at the top, its face frozen at 11:59. That was where the stillness felt thickest, like time itself was holding its breath. I stepped through the silent plaza, my eyes drawn to a statue at its center, a figure robed in wind, arms outstretched. At its base, the name was nearly worn away, but I could just make it out. Lyra. The moment I spoke the name aloud, a tremor passed through the city. Lanterns flickered, curtains stirred, and somewhere, deep within the tower, a single chime rang out. The book opened without my touch. The name Lyra appeared in golden ink. 5 now. Valhalla stirred slightly in its sleep, just enough to sigh. The path would take me elsewhere, but I felt certain this place would wake fully one day. Maybe when all the names were remembered. Maybe when the final bell rang. I left Valhalla behind, its sigh still lingering in the folds of my cloak. The road ahead unfurled in silence, though I no longer felt alone. The remembered names within the book hummed softly, like companions walking a step behind. Their presence was comforting, even if unseen. The path led me into a dense thicket of trees shaped like question marks. The leaves rustled in patterns that didn't quite form words, but nearly did, phrases half-born, meanings just out of reach. The deeper I walked, the quieter my thoughts became, as if the forest were gently borrowing them. At the heart of this hush stood a house made entirely of ears. Yes, ears. It was no larger than a cottage, and its walls bristled with listening. Great elephant ears, tiny mouse ears, ears shaped like leaves, shells, and delicate spirals. They twitched as I approached, each one angling toward me with curiosity. I hesitated, but the book urged me forward with a soft glow. The door opened on its own. Inside, the silence was total. And then I saw him. A tall figure cloaked in feathers and shadow stood at a desk cluttered with glass jars. Each jar contained a sound. Some glowed faintly, others sparkled or pulsed. A jar nearest to me trembled with the whisper of a lullaby. The figure turned. His face was a mirror. "You've come to return something," he said, though his voice made no sound. I didn't understand, but my hands moved anyway. I reached into the book and pulled out a whisper, a memory of a promise I had once made and forgotten. I gave it to him. He held it gently, bowed, and added it to a jar marked with a name I hadn't known I remembered. Soren. The jar glowed. So did the book. 6 now. The collector smiled, not with his mouth, but with the tilt of his head. Then the cottage melted back into forest, and the road waited once more. The forest faded behind me like mist curling off morning glass, and the path turned downward, softening into marshland. My boots sank into velvet moss, and the air grew wet with hush. The book hovered lower now, as if humbled by the silence that stretched ahead. Soon I came to a lake. Its surface was perfectly still, not a single ripple disturbing its glass-like sheen. Trees leaned over its edge, but did not reflect in it. Instead, the water showed stars bright and distant, twinkling where no sky could be seen. I stepped forward, expecting chill, but the water was warm. It welcomed my ankles, then my knees, then my waist. I held the book above my head as I waded deeper, though it didn't seem to mind the water. It pulsed gently, like it trusted me completely. Then I saw it beneath the surface, a stairwell, spiraling downward into darkness. I took a breath and stepped onto the first stair. No splash, no sound, just the sensation of weight shifting. As I descended, I realized I could still breathe. The water thickened, like walking through memory. Faint lights drifted past, shapes that looked like fish, but flickered like thoughts. Some brushed my skin and vanished into bubbles. The stairwell ended at a door. Behind it, a chamber of shimmering blue. In its center sat a woman on a stone bench, playing a harp of crystal threads. Her song rippled through the water, not as sound, but feeling, sorrow softened by hope. She looked up. Her eyes glowed with liquid light. "I remember you," she whispered, though her lips did not move. "We played once, in the garden of shifting tides." The memory bloomed within me, salt on skin, laughter in waves, music that bent moonlight. I nodded. The book opened. Her name wrote itself in luminous ink. Nida. 7 now. She smiled, strummed one final chord, and the lake released me. I rose through the surface, lighter than before. The road resumed. The path reappeared at the lake's edge, lined now with smooth stones that whispered with each step. I walked in stillness, the scent of rain clinging to the air, though the sky had not opened in days. Soon, the terrain changed, gently at first, then suddenly. I stepped into an orchard. The wind returned as I left the orchard, brushing gently against my cheek like a forgotten lullaby. It carried the scent of something ancient, dust, feathers, and distant rain. Ahead, the path narrowed into a stone causeway suspended between cliffs. Birds circled overhead, though none made a sound. But these were not living birds. They were feathered shapes, some formed from parchment, others from silk, some etched from glass that glinted with the color of clouds. They circled endlessly, wings beating without effort, eyes hollow yet watchful. The sky above them shimmered like parchment too thin to hold its shape. At the causeway's center stood an aviary made of silver wire and wind. No walls, no doors, just a shape built from memory. Inside, a man stood quietly, feeding the paper birds with folded thoughts. Each thought looked like an origami poem. He didn't speak as I approached, but one of the birds fluttered down to land on my shoulder. It felt weightless, like a memory never spoken aloud. The man turned to me. He had wings, not grand or radiant, but soft, gray, and lined with ink stains. They moved slowly behind him, as if dreaming of flight they no longer needed. "I used to teach them to sing," he said, his voice quiet as wine through threadbare curtains. But then the silence came. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The bird on my shoulder let out a single soft note, and it echoed against the cliffs, not as sound, but as emotion, a wordless longing. The book beside me opened. The name formed like a feather drifting into ink. "Ithiel, 8 now." The man smiled. "Tell them, when they sing again, to sing gently." Then he vanished into mist, and the birds followed, one by one, until the sky was empty. The causeway ended at a staircase of cloud. I climbed without looking back. Each step of the cloud staircase was softer than breath, yet firm beneath my feet. I climbed through silence, but it was a welcoming silence, the kind that listens rather than demands. The sky around me shifted with every pace, now pale rose, now deep indigo, now the soft hue of candle smoke. There was no wind, no horizon, only the stairs, winding upward through memory and dream. After a time, I realized I wasn't tired. I should have been. I had climbed hundreds, perhaps thousands, of steps, but my legs moved as if each step restored something once lost. A strength beyond muscle, a rhythm older than heartbeat. Then I heard it, not a sound exactly, but the memory of one. A laugh, warm, familiar. I quickened my pace, and there she was, sitting casually on a step as if waiting for a friend. A girl of maybe 12 years, though her eyes were ancient. She wore a crown of reeds and string, and her dress was stitched from pages torn from unwritten books. She grinned when she saw me. "You took your time," she said, tossing me a pebble shaped like a comma. I've been looping the same 7 steps for hours. I blinked. The stairs behind her twisted in on themselves like a spiral chasing its own tail. This staircase forgets to end sometimes, she explained. You have to give it a reason. The book hovered beside me. She pointed at it. Use my name. I hesitated. She winked. You knew it once. And I did. The name leapt into my heart, clear as morning. Yelviai. The book etched it instantly. 9. The stairs shifted with a sigh, and the spiral untwisted. Elvie waved. I'll see you again. Probably sideways. And she stepped off the edge. I didn't cry out. Somehow I knew. She wasn't falling. She was flying. And the stairs remembered where they were going. So I followed. The staircase ended where night began. Not the kind of night that darkens skies or silences birds, but a deeper, softer night. One that settled gently onto my shoulders like a woolen shawl. Stars hung low here, drifting lazily just above the earth. I could have reached out and plucked them like fruit, had I dared. Ahead, the path narrowed to a bridge of woven vines, suspended between 2 glowing cliffs. The vines pulsed faintly, as if carrying light not from the sun, but from memory. At the bridge's midpoint stood a lantern. It hung in midair, unbound by chain or pole, glowing with a light that flickered like candle flame behind a curtain. As I neared, the lantern lowered slightly, meeting me at a level. Its frame was made of polished bone, its glass etched with constellations I almost recognized. The book floated beside me, silent but alert. From the shadows, a figure emerged. He was tall and slender, his skin the color of ink spilled across parchment. A cloak of night hung from his shoulders, dotted with tiny glimmers like distant galaxies. His eyes held the quiet of deep caves and long-forgotten lullabies. I carry the night so others may rest, he said, but I've forgotten where to set it down. He gestured to the lantern. Would you take it, just for a while? I reached forward and lifted it. The moment my hand closed around the handle, warmth surged through me, not heat, but calm, stillness, understanding. The lantern dimmed, and his name lit the book. Namir. 10 now. He bowed deeply, a gesture of gratitude older than language. Then he stepped backward into the darkness, vanishing without a sound. I stood alone on the bridge, lantern in hand. The stars blinked above me, and the night moved with me as I walked. The bridge faded behind me like morning fog, leaving only the soft glow of Namir's lantern in my hand. I walked a path of nothing, no earth, no sky, only space that gently held my footsteps as if the world had paused just for me. Then, ahead, I saw it. A door. No walls surrounded it. No frame, no hinges. Just a tall, arched door of weathered oak, freestanding in the void. It pulsed faintly, not with light, but with presence like it was breathing. The book floated closer. Its pages trembled. I approached slowly. On the door's surface was a brass keyhole, but no handle. I pressed my palm against the wood. Warm. Familiar. Then, a voice, soft, like it had traveled from another lifetime, spoke behind me. You left this unopened. I turned. No one stood there, but a shadow lingered, not cast by light, but by memory. And then I remembered. The door had once stood in my cottage, hidden behind a wall I never questioned. I had passed it 1,000 times and never asked why the space between rooms felt wrong. I had always known something waited behind it. Now, the key appeared. Not in my hand, not in the book, but within my mind, a memory made solid. A promise I'd once whispered to myself. When you're ready, you'll return. I placed the key into the lock. The door's side opened. Beyond it was not a room, but a moment. A single instant, frozen in light. Myself as a child, standing in the candlelight of the Windlight's first spark, watching it bloom, watching it burn. I stepped through. The light folded around me like a lullaby. When I stepped back out, the door was gone. And in the book, the name waited. Corwin. 11 now. The space around me solidified into a path once more. And ahead, something began to hum. The hum grew louder as I walked, resonating not just in my ears but in my chest, my ribs, the soft marrow of memory. It wasn't music in the usual sense, no melody, no words, just layered tones, rising and falling like tides, warm and ancient. The path led to an open hall carved from rose-colored stone. Pillars grew like trees, each one twisting upward until lost in the dusky ceiling above. The space was wide and circular, and in its center stood 12 figures. They were cloaked, robed in cloth stitched from smoke and ash, and they stood in perfect stillness. Their faces were blank. No eyes, no mouths, no markings. And yet, they were singing, not with voices, but with presence. A resonance that filled the space like breath in a bellows. I felt their song like heat from a hearth, like tears that don't fall but still sting the throat. The book opened without my touch. Pages fluttered, then stilled. The choir turned in unison to face me, their blank faces solemn, kind. One stepped forward. Their robes rustled like wings brushing stone. In their hands, they carried a shard of glass that pulsed with inner light. They held it out to me, wordlessly. When I touched it, I remembered standing among them once, silent, hooded, singing not with a mouth, but with truth. I had been part of their harmony long ago. The shard dissolved in my palm, melting into warmth, and a name glowed across the book's waiting page. Viren, 12 now. The choir bowed as one, and their hum began to fade. One by one, they stepped back into the shadows. And though the hall remained, it suddenly felt vast and empty, like a cathedral remembering the echo of prayer. The book turned another page. The next path began to bloom beneath my feet. The path beneath me glowed with soft gold, winding gently upward through a corridor of drifting time. Not mist, not shadow, time itself, floating like loose thread. Moments shimmered around me, glimpses of children laughing, stars collapsing, hands parting after one final touch. I didn't stop to stare, though each vision tugged at something quiet in my chest. At the corridor's end stood a clock tower, not towering from without, but from within. The moment I stepped inside, I understood. This was not a place to tell time. It was a place to feel it. The room was circular, lit by gears that rotated silently in the walls. In the center, a clock as tall as I was ticked backward. Each tick undid something invisible, perhaps a breath I hadn't taken yet, a word I was about to speak. Beneath the clock sat a man in a chair carved from seconds in size. He wore no timepiece, yet his every breath was measured, each blink deliberate. He looked up, eyes sharp and still. "You're ahead of schedule," he said, with a faint smile. I tilted my head. I didn't know there was one. He laughed softly. "That's how I know you're right on time." He stood and placed a palm on the backward-moving clock. It slowed, paused. "For a name to be remembered," he said, "you must let go of when it was lost." He gestured for me to do the same. I placed my hand beside his. The clock began ticking forward. The book beside me opened, its pages rustling with relief. Ink pooled, forming a name as smooth and balanced as breath. Rail, 13. The man bowed his head, and his chair dissolved into nothing. He did not follow it. He simply stopped being there. The gears in the walls resumed their quiet rhythm, and the door ahead cracked open with the sound of a sigh being kept. The door ahead opened onto twilight. Not evening, not morning, something between. A silver dusk that softened the edges of the world. I stepped into a garden nestled inside a bowl of hills, each slope layered in quiet mist. No wind stirred, no birds sang, but the stones were blooming. They jutted from the earth like forgotten thoughts, tall, smooth, and cool-colored. Some were flecked with quartz, others veined with silver or sea-green glass. And from the cracks in each stone bloomed strange, luminous flowers. They glowed faintly, pulsing like heartbeats. Each flower was different. One bloomed in the shape of a snowflake, another like a burning spiral. Their colors changed as I passed, some warming, some cooling, all remembering. At the garden's center was a single boulder carved into the shape of a reclining figure. She lay with eyes closed, arms crossed over her chest, her face serene as if caught in a peaceful dream. The book opened before I touched it. A flower bloomed from her heart. Petals of ink and light curled upward, and from their center came a single whispered word. I remember. Tears filled my eyes, unbidden. Not sadness, just a fullness too vast to name. I stepped closer and placed a hand on the stone. The name unfolded across the book's page in looping script, elegant and sure. Anna, 14 now. The garden sighed around me. Some stones cracked further, and new flowers bloomed where the petals had withered. As I turned to go, the stone figure smiled, just a little. The path reformed itself from flower stems and memory. I followed it. Behind me, the garden pulsed once, then fell still. The new path climbed gently, winding through mist that tasted faintly of stone and rain. As I ascended, I noticed the sky above had turned amber, soft and heavy, like the last breath before sleep. Shadows leaned sideways, as if gravity had made up its mind to behave differently here. Then I saw it. A tower, leaning at an impossible angle. Its base clung to a jagged cliff's edge, while its top pointed toward the horizon like an accusing finger. Stone blocks jutted out unevenly, and windows floated just above the structure as if undecided about staying attached. It should have fallen ages ago, and yet it hadn't. I approached slowly, my steps growing quiet. A figure sat atop a pile of rubble at the tower's base, arms folded, legs dangling. They were small and thin, wearing armor cobbled together from broken teacups, shattered mirrors, and buttons. Their eyes were bright and defiant. "You're late," they said. "I'm always right on time," I replied, a little surprised at my own confidence. They grinned. "Good. Then you're ready to help." They pointed upward. "I've been holding this tower together with willpower and strength, but memory would work better." I opened the book. A page flipped itself. The figure didn't look at it. Instead, they leaned forward and whispered their name directly into the wind. Thallow. The tower shifted. A deep groan echoed through the stone, followed by a long, slow exhale, like a house finally allowed to relax. The windows floated back into place. The blocks realigned. The tower stood a little straighter. The name Thallow etched itself in the book in blocky, confident letters. 15. The figure saluted me. "Tell the others I kept it standing." "I will," I promised. Then the path opened once more, curving toward a field of glass and silence. The path unraveled into a vast, flat field where the ground sparkled with fragments, glass, crystal, ice, and something else I couldn't name. It stretched in every direction, shimmering beneath a silver sky, with no wind, no sound, and no skyborn sun to guide me. Only the soft light of memory. I stepped carefully. Each footfall clicked softly, not breaking the silence, but adding to it, like a musician placing the first notes of a song meant to be finished later. The field was made of echoes. Every shard beneath my boots carried a voice, quiet and half-remembered. When I paused to listen, I could hear them. Fragments of sentences, gasps of laughter, the final words of a bedtime story. They drifted up from the broken glass like ghosts. In the middle of it all stood a woman. She wore robes made of threads that shimmered like cracked mirrors. Her face was kind, though her eyes were filled with sorrow. Not her own sorrow, others. Carried, collected, and worn gently. She didn't speak. She simply held out a broken bell. It had no clapper, but when I took it, it rang. The sound wasn't heard, it was felt. A memory I didn't know I'd lost unfolded inside me, kneeling by a grave of someone unnamed, someone deeply loved. A farewell left unfinished, a goodbye never spoken. The book opened, and this time I whispered the name. Leafy, 16 now. She smiled, and the glass around us began to soften. It didn't mend. It didn't repair itself. It simply became quiet. She stepped backward and faded into the pieces. The bell vanished from my hand, and a new path rose before me, not of stone or dirt, but woven from light and threadbare silence. The path ahead was unlike any I had walked before. It wasn't made of earth or glass or memory, but of golden threads, fine as spider silk, stretching across a void that pulsed like a heartbeat. I stepped lightly, the threads holding me with impossible strength, swaying with each step but never letting me fall. Above, stars shimmered in patterns that shifted when I blinked. They weren't fixed in the sky, they floated, close enough to touch. Some flared brighter as I passed, others winked out, leaving behind a trace of warmth in the dark. After a time I could not measure, I saw her. She sat at a loom woven from constellations, her hands a blur of grace and rhythm. Her hair flowed behind her like comet trails, and her skin bore the color of twilight clouds, neither dusk nor dawn, but something in between. She wove with the golden threads I now walked upon. Each motion of her hands pulled meaning into form, gestures that shaped lives, destinies, or perhaps only dreams. She did not stop her work as I approached. "You're fraying," she said gently, nodding toward the book beside me. I looked. The edges of the pages shimmered with uncertainty, as if beginning to come undone. "You've remembered much," she said, "but the threads holding it all together are thin. What do I do?" I asked. She paused, reached into her loom, and handed me a single thread. "Name me," she said, "and the thread will strengthen." The book opened. No pages turned. The ink flowed naturally, as if the name had always been waiting. Syra, 17. The thread pulsed in my hand and sank into the spine of the book, binding it tighter. She smiled and returned to her weaving. The path rewove itself beneath me, shimmering, and I walked on. The thread-woven path faded into mist, and from that mist, a single door appeared. This one was made of glass, etched with droplets that glistened even though no rain had fallen. When I touched it, it felt cool, like the air before a storm. I stepped through. Inside was a room filled with clouds. They drifted along the ceiling, low and heavy, their bellies thick with silver. The scent of rain hung in the air, wet stone, soaked bark, the hush of leaves before a downpour. But the rain never came. It waited. Puddles dotted the stone floor, though the ceiling had not wept. In each pool, I saw reflections, not of myself, but of moments I had never lived. A child chasing a paper boat through gutters. A couple dancing in the drizzle, laughing as lightning stitched the sky. A lone traveler standing in a field, arms raised as thunder rolled like a drumbeat from the hills. In the center of the room stood a man holding an empty umbrella. He didn't speak. He simply nodded toward the puddles, and I understood. I knelt beside one. My hand hovered just above the water. The book opened, and I whispered the name that suddenly filled me. Dio. The rain fell. Not all at once, but gently, like it had been holding its breath for years and was finally allowed to exhale. The umbrella filled. The clouds wept in quiet joy. Dale smiled, eyes glistening, and slowly began to fade, drifting upward like mist rising after a storm. The room washed clean. The puddles grew still. The path ahead shimmered into view, damp and soft beneath my feet. 18 names now. The rain behind me whispered thanks, and I walked on, a little more whole than before. The path from the rain room wound upward through air that shimmered like heat above a fire. Yet it was cool to the touch, and my breath came easily. The world grew brighter, not with light, but with presence, like I was walking through the edges of a thought just before it became a word. Then I saw the bridge. It stretched from one floating rock to another, made not of stone or thread, but of voices, layered together in harmony. The sound held shape. Notes curled around my ankles and wrapped beneath my feet, supporting me. Laughter echoed like handrails. Whispers bent into steps. Every footfall released a phrase, a name, a secret. I listened. You were always more than you believe. She kept the seed even after the fire. Do you remember the color of his eyes when he left? Each step was a memory, not mine, borrowed. And waiting at the center of the bridge was a figure draped in veils of silk and song. Their face shifted with each word that passed their lips, sometimes familiar, sometimes foreign, sometimes both at once. They opened their mouth, and out came my voice. From another time, a time I had forgotten. I'm not ready to lose her. The words hit something deep inside me, a memory I had sealed away. The figure nodded, as if to say, "You were heard." The book opened slowly, as if afraid. But the name that formed came without pain. Marin, 19. The figure reached for my hand, not to stop me, but to guide me forward. Their touch was soft as song, and then they vanished, their veil falling gently into the wind. The bridge hummed one last time, then unraveled behind me. Ahead, the world opened like a book, and the next page was waiting. The world beyond the bridge shimmered softly, folding inward like a paper lantern. I found myself in a small round room that felt much larger on the inside, the kind of place where sound stepped lightly and time politely waited outside the door. It was filled with chairs. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each one different. Some simple, carved from wood or bone. Others extravagant, gilded and jeweled. A few shaped like spirals or hourglasses, others too abstract to describe. And on each chair sat a letter, sealed with wax. I didn't need to open them to know they were invitations. Not to parties or places, but to moments. Moments someone had been too afraid, too late, or too uncertain to accept. A chair in the far corner caught my eye. It was plain, painted blue and worn at the edges, like something from a child's room. The letter on its seat bore no wax seal, only a simple ribbon tied in a bow. I picked it up. The ribbon untied itself. Inside was a single line. You were invited to stay longer. And you left. The ache that bloomed in my chest was not regret, exactly, but recognition. I had left someone once, thinking I was doing the right thing. I hadn't known how much they wanted me to stay. The room was still. The chairs listened. I held the letter to my chest. The book opened. The name appeared as if it had always waited behind a closed door. Aylin, 20. Half remembered now. I placed the letter back on the chair. And as I did, the ribbon tied itself again, neater than before. The door appeared in the wall behind me, quiet, expectant. And with a deep breath, I stepped through. The door led to a staircase made of soundless chimes. Each step looked like silver and rang with a tone I couldn't hear, only feel. My bones knew the notes, even if my ears didn't. It was as if each step tuned me, note by note, to something older than melody. At the top, I entered a chamber that was both a concert hall and a forest. Tall trees grew from a stage made of polished stone, and vines hung from the rafters like green strings of an unplayed harp. The air was thick with stillness, but not the empty kind, the waiting kind. A single violin stood at the center of the stage, its strings made of moonlight. And beside it, the musician. She wore no shoes. Her gown was sewn from silence itself, flowing, gentle, endless. Her hands hovered over the violin, but she did not play. She looked up at me with a quiet question in her eyes. And somehow I understood. Music doesn't always need to be heard. Sometimes, it only needs to be remembered. I stepped onto the stage and placed my hand over my heart. She nodded once, then lifted the violin. Her bow moved. No sound echoed through the hall, but tears filled my eyes. It was the memory of a song once played beside a cradle. The lullaby of someone I had never met, but had always missed. I could feel the tune vibrating inside my chest, weaving threads through every name I had gathered. The book opened itself in silence. Her name appeared in a note-shaped script. Ellerin, 21. She lowered the bow, smiled gently, and stepped backward into the shadows of the trees, leaving only the violin behind. The forest folded around me, branch by branch, becoming a corridor. The song lingered in my ribs, and I followed the silence into the green. The corridor of trees led into a deeper forest, one untouched by wind or light. The leaves above were thick and unmoving, casting a greenish gloom that felt both ancient and newborn. Each step I took stirred nothing, no branches, no birds, no whispers. This forest wasn't sleeping. It had forgotten how to wake. The trunks of the trees were marked with shallow carvings, lines and curves that hinted at names, maps, or songs. But they were incomplete, as though the forest had begun to tell its story, then lost the thread. The book floated beside me, turning pages without showing words. It was listening. I walked until the path disappeared. That's when I saw the woman. She stood barefoot in a clearing where moss glowed faintly beneath her feet. Her dress was woven from roots and fallen petals, and her hair was a crown of leaves, dried and crumbling. She was still as the trees. I stepped closer, but she didn't move. Her eyes were open, staring at something I couldn't see, something far away or deep within. A statue of memory, half carved and left unfinished. The book opened. This time, no ink formed. Instead, I knelt and placed my palm on the moss beside her, and I spoke the name that filled the space between us like mist. Iriel. It echoed softly through the forest. The woman blinked. A leaf fell from her crown, and the trees breathed in. Just once, but it was enough. Branches stirred above. Light filtered down. Somewhere, faint and trembling, a bird called out. The forest hadn't remembered everything, but it remembered enough. The moss parted gently to reveal a new trail, winding through roots and golden shadow. I whispered a thank you to the trees. Then I walked on. The forest opened gradually, the trees parting like curtains to reveal something utterly unexpected. A market. Stalls stood beneath canvas tents, but the colors were faded, their edges tattered. No merchants called out. No customers bartered. Yet everything was perfectly in place, waiting, tools neatly arranged, jars carefully labeled, wares displayed with pride. But what they sold was not ordinary. One stall offered bottled decisions, each stoppered with wax and labeled with times that never happened. Another had baskets full of laughter woven into ribbons, some frayed, some bright. A booth displayed regrets shaped like coins, sorted by weight. And at the far end of the row sat an old man behind a stall of blank books. He looked up as I approached. "I remember you," he said. "You never bought anything, just stood and stared, as if you'd already lost the thing you needed." I looked at the books. There were no titles, no pages. "They're for trades," he explained. "One memory, in exchange for one unwritten truth." I hesitated, then opened the book at my side. The man gently placed his hand over it. "No," he said, "not that one. You'll need all of them before the end." He reached under the stall and retrieved a single book, its cover soft as cloth, its spine stitched in thread. "You already paid for this," he said, eyes kind. The book in my hands opened on its own. The name flowed in a threadbare scrawl. Corwin, my own, 29. For a long moment, I stood in silence. Then I bowed. The market stirred. Tents fluttered. A soft breeze blew through, waking the dust. And behind the final booth, a path opened beneath the shells of rainless sky. The path from the market narrowed until it was no more than a thread of soft dirt, barely wide enough for 2 feet. On either side, reeds grew tall, golden, and silent, swaying to a wind I could not feel. The sky above turned pale and wide, as if stretched too thin by memory. Then I heard it. A slow, deliberate sound, not rushing water, not trickling, but something in between. A river. I came upon it as one might discover a thought they didn't know they were holding. Wide, silver, calm. Its surface was like a mirror left to dream. It moved not forward or backward, but inward, curling gently around itself. A boat waited at the bank. No oars, no sail, just a vessel carved from driftwood and moonlight. I stepped in. It moved without urging, gliding across the surface like breath over stillness. As we drifted, I saw shapes beneath the water, moments I had forgotten even in my remembering. My mother's hand brushing the hair from my brow. A firefly trapped in a jar that I later let go. The moment I first lit the Windlight and whispered, "Please don't go out." The river knew me, and it loved me anyway. The boat came to rest beside a smooth stone slab. Upon it sat a woman with long white hair and skin like old bark, thin and soft. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes met mine, and I knew. She had carried me across this river once, a long time ago, when I was small and full of grief. I hadn't remembered her, not until now. The book opened, and the name wrote itself with reverence. Lorien, 30. She smiled, nodded once, and vanished. Not in mist, not in light, just was no longer there. The boat drifted back to shore, and the path continued, wrapped in quiet wonder. The river disappeared behind me, as if it had never existed except in memory. The path narrowed into a corridor of dusk. No walls, no sky, just shadow deep enough to feel like velvet. I walked without fear. Ahead, a soft glow. It flickered like a heartbeat, warm and golden. I approached slowly, each step careful, reverent. It was a candle, set alone atop a stone pedestal. Tall, pale wax. A steady flame. No wind touched it, but it moved as though listening. The same flame I had tended for all those years. The Windlight. But this wasn't the one in my cottage. It was older. The first, perhaps. A figure stood behind it. Not tall, not imposing, just familiar. He looked like me. Not exactly, but close. A reflection of a younger self, or one yet to come. His eyes held stories I hadn't lived. His smile was quiet, patient. "You kept it burning," he said. I nodded. I didn't know why. I just did. "That's why it mattered," he replied. "Some flames need no reason." He reached out, and the candle brightened. Not with fire, but memory, its light revealing paths, faces, names. Every name I had gathered shimmered in the air around us, orbiting like stars. "Each one," he whispered, "was a piece of you." The book opened, blank. Then the ink formed one letter at a time, slow and certain. Corwin. Again, but this time it glowed. My name, reclaimed. The figure placed his hand over mine. "I was the first keeper. You were the last. Until the next." The candle pulsed once, and the room unfolded into light. I stepped forward, and the path beyond me opened like a memory finally understood. The path of light dimmed slowly, not into darkness, but into depth. The air grew thick, not with weight, but with silence. And then, quite suddenly, I was walking beneath water. No splash, no breath held, just the slow, dreamlike motion of steps taken in a world that moved differently. The sea around me was vast, calm, and filled with things long lost. Helmets, teacups, feathers, forgotten toys. They drifted by like leaves on an autumn wind, suspended in memory. Fish with translucent scales glided past without fear, their fins stirring trails of music I could not hear. Ahead, the shape of a clock emerged. Not a tower this time, but a vast disk of stone lying on the seabed. Its hands were rusted and unmoving, set at a strange hour, one I couldn't read. Around it, coral had bloomed in soft spirals, as if nature itself was keeping time in place. Beside the clock sat a figure carved from sea glass. They were faceless, but unmistakably serene. A harp rested in their lap, its strings swaying in the gentle current though no fingers moved across them. I knelt before them without knowing why. The book opened on its own, and for the first time, I did not need to speak a name. It was already there. Newman, 32. The harp strummed itself once, a single clear note rippling through the water, stirring shells and shadows alike. Then the stone clock's hands moved, just slightly. Not forward, not back, but inward. I stood, and the sea began to fold upward like a page turning. Light filtered in from above, and I rose, through memory, through water, towards something waiting beyond time. I emerged from the sea not gasping, but calm, my clothes dry, my heart lighter. The world above was twilight once more, tinged in lavender and pale gold. The air smelled of old wood and memory. Before me, a staircase rose into the sky. Each step was made of a single, wide leaf, some crimson, some copper, some soft as dusk. They didn't fall. They floated, suspended in stillness, waiting for my weight to give them purpose. I placed a foot on the first one. It held. The leaf shimmered with warmth beneath my step and drifted upward, gently carrying me to the next. I climbed. Each step rose in turn, never hurried, never strained. Above and below, more leaves spiraled around me, each carrying images in their veins, a mother's lullaby, a child's quiet bravery, a farewell never spoken. As I neared the top, I saw him, an old man, seated on a throne of woven branches and hollow wind. His beard was moss, and his eyes were clouded, not with blindness, but with memory too thick to see through. He looked at me with a soft smile. "You remembered more than most," he said. "I'm trying," I answered. "You're doing," he replied. "That's enough." He reached into his chest, not painfully, but like drawing from a well, and held out a single golden leaf. "This was the first leaf ever let go," he said. I took it. It crumbled into light. The book opened and gently accepted the dust. The name that formed glowed like the start of autumn. Varen, 33. He closed his eyes, and the staircase beneath me drifted downward, leaf by leaf, into a forest I did not know, but felt I had once called home. The forest I descended into was not quite spring, not quite autumn. Buds clung to the ends of branches even as golden leaves fell around them. Petals drifted across frost-dusted moss. The wind was neither warm nor cold. It was the hush that lives between seasons. In the heart of that in-between stood a house. It looked grown, not built. The walls were bark and ivy, the roof layered with overlapping feathers and fern. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, smelling faintly of cinnamon and stone. The door was already open. Inside, everything felt like it was waiting. A kettle sat on the stove, warm but not boiling. A book rested on a table, closed with a ribbon. A rocking chair creaked gently, moved by no hand. And in the corner sat a woman, spinning thread from a wheel with no spindle. She glanced up and smiled. "You came back," she said. Her voice was soft and weathered with kindness. "I don't remember being here," I said. "Not with your mind," she nodded. "But your soul remembers comfort. You rested here, once, between the worst of it." I felt my eyes sting. She patted the chair beside her. I sat. For a long while, we said nothing. She spun her invisible thread. I listened to the sound of it, the soft hum of peace. When it was time, she reached into her apron and handed me a small wooden ring. "For the days you thought you couldn't continue, but did." The book opened in my lap, and the name wrote itself like a lullaby. Reelin, 34. She pressed her forehead to mine. "Don't forget the quiet places." Then she was gone, not vanished, just no longer needed. I stood, the warmth of the house still in my bones, and stepped back into the twilight, where the path waited like an old friend. The path turned quiet again, winding through low hills draped in velvet dusk. Shadows stretched softly across the ground, not menacing, just thoughtful, like the land was remembering itself one curve at a time. Then I saw it, a tree taller than any tower, its trunk knotted with age, its bark silvered with time. From every branch hung a lantern, hundreds of them. Some glowed warm and steady, others flickered. A few were dim, barely lit at all. They swayed gently, even without wind, casting light that shimmered with memory. I approached slowly. At the base of the tree sat a young boy, no older than 10, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in his lap. He wore a cloak too big for his frame and boots worn at the toe. He looked up at me and smiled. "You've come a long way," he said. I nodded. "So have you." He pointed upward, toward a lantern hanging higher than the rest. It pulsed with golden rhythm, as if beating in time with something just beneath my ribs. "That one is yours," he said. I gazed at it. I knew it. "I didn't hang it there," I said quietly. "You didn't need to," the boy replied. "It always knew where to wait." The book hovered beside me. The boy reached out and tapped it once with a small finger. The page turned, and the name appeared in childlike handwriting, curling and joyful. Sel, 35. The boy stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He didn't say goodbye. He simply climbed the lantern tree, higher and higher, until I could no longer see him. Only the soft light of my lantern burning gently in the branches. The path curved forward, lit by dozens more, and I followed. The lantern tree faded behind me, its lights casting long shadows that grew softer with each step. The air had shifted, lighter now, tinged with the quiet certainty of nearing something once left behind. The path led to a narrow bridge of white stone stretched over a vast chasm. But the chasm wasn't dark. It shimmered with memory. Beneath the bridge flowed moments, countless and shifting, like constellations swimming in a river of sky. I saw myself as a child, reaching for a moth. I saw old friends I hadn't remembered until now. I saw laughter, loss, mistakes, forgiveness. And beyond the bridge stood my cottage, the same crooked little home perched above the cliffs of Lornwind. Smoke rose from the chimney. The Windlight flickered in the window. I stopped at the bridge's edge, because standing halfway across, waiting in stillness, was the first version of me, the one who had never left, the one who stayed by the candle, who grew older, quieter, alone. He looked up as I approached. We studied each other. He smiled first. I kept the flame alive, he said. I know, I whispered, and I remembered why. We stood for a moment that wasn't bound by time. Then he stepped aside, letting me pass. As I crossed, the book opened in my hands one final time, not with a new name, but with all of them. Each name I had gathered shimmered on the page, no longer scattered fragments, but a single story. And in the center, the name that had been there all along. Corwin. The bridge behind me softened into mist. The cottage waited, and I took one last breath before returning home. The door creaked open as I approached. No key, no knock, no pause. It welcomed me as if I had never left. The cottage smelled the same. Wood smoke, old paper, and something warm beneath it all, like the memory of honey. The Windlight still burned above the hearth. Its flame was unchanged, small but steady, casting a circle of light that had never once wavered, no matter what storm raged beyond the walls. But now, I saw it differently. It was not just a candle. It was a listener. I stepped inside and placed the book gently on the table. Its pages fluttered once, then stilled, the ink still warm from the journey. All the names I had gathered remained etched there, glowing faintly, alive in their own quiet way. The flame leaned toward the book. Not a flicker, not a gust, a deliberate movement. And then, the light began to shift. Not grow brighter, not dim, just deeper. Within it, shapes began to form. Faces, places, moments. All the names I had carried burned within the flame now, not as firewood, but as fuel for something older. Memory made light. The Windlight pulsed once, as if in agreement. Then the candle spoke, not with words, not with sound, but with understanding. You are remembered. The flame danced in response to every breath I took, as though matching my heartbeat. I sat beside it and watched. I didn't feel the need to move. For the first time, perhaps in many lives, I was not chasing memory. I was held by it. The wind outside sighed across the cliffs, gentle and distant. The candle's light grew just enough to warm the corners of the room. And I knew this wasn't the end, only the moment before something new. Night settled gently outside the cottage, and the Windlight's glow held back the dark with quiet confidence. I sat in stillness, watching shadows lean across the walls like old companions returning from a long walk. The book remained open beside me. Its pages no longer turned on their own. They waited, not for more names, but for choice. Then I noticed it, on the far wall of the cottage, just beside the shelf where I used to keep dried herbs and ink bottles. A door. It hadn't been there before, not once in all my years here. It was simple, unmarked, but I knew instinctively it didn't lead out into the world. It led inward. I rose. When I touched the handle, I felt everything. Every step I had taken since leaving the cottage. Every name, every moment, every flicker of wonder and grief and joy. The door pulsed beneath my fingers, as if alive. I opened it. On the other side was a room that looked like mine. Same walls, same hearth, same candle. But it wasn't mine. It belonged to all the versions of me I might have been. They stood inside, silent and kind. Some younger, some older. Some wearing the marks of journeys I hadn't taken. Some bearing the sorrow of choices I never made. And they were waiting for me. One by one, they nodded. And I understood. To remember is not just to gather pieces, but to welcome them home. I stepped inside. The versions of me faded, not vanished, just joined. The room folded around me, not smaller, but closer, truer. And when I turned back toward the door, it was gone. But I wasn't alone. I was whole, and the candle still burned. The room felt different now, not changed, but revealed, as if it had always been like this, only I hadn't known how to see it. The walls no longer held stone and wood, but memory and meaning. The windows looked out onto skies I had never flown, and beneath the floor, I felt the pulse of stories still being written. The windlight on the hearth flared gently. It was no longer just a flame. It was a keeper, like me, a witness to everything I had gathered. I moved to the table, where the book still waited, open to the last page. All 39 names glowed there, arranged not in lines, but in a spiral curving inward, each one connected to the next, none forgotten. At the center was my own, Corwin, but beneath it, space remained. One final line, one final name. I hesitated. What else was left? Then I heard it, a whisper, soft as breath through leaves. Not outside. Inside. You have remembered everyone but the one who carried them. I placed my hand on the page, and for a moment, I saw everything. The first time I lit the candle, the rain-soaked night I almost gave up, the strangers I had carried home in memory, the boy who smiled at me from the lantern tree, the faces that had once been mine, and in the center of it all, the part of me I had never dared name, the part that waited. I picked up the pen, and I wrote. The listener. The ink glowed brighter than any other. 40. The book closed with a quiet sigh, not of ending, but of arrival. The windlight pulsed once more, and I understood. The windlight pulsed one last time. Not brighter, not louder, just deeper. It warmed the walls of the cottage, touched the spines of old books, whispered across the stone floor. And then, slowly, it lifted. The flame rose from its cradle, not with force, but grace, ascending through the air like a breath finally released. It shimmered, not orange or gold, but every color I had gathered in memory. Every name I had carried burned softly within its glow. I stood beneath it, the book closed and still in my hands. The flame hovered above me. Then it split, not breaking, but blooming. A single point of light drifted upward, passing through the roof, into the sky beyond. I followed it to the doorway, stepping out into the cool air. Above the cliffs of Lornwind, where stars had once been distant, one now gleamed brighter than the rest. New, alive, the windlight had become a star, a light to guide the next traveler, the next listener. I did not weep. Instead, I sat on the grass and opened the book again, not to read, but to rest. The names glowed softly, not as burdens, but as companions. I whispered them, one by one, into the wind. And with each name, the world seemed to breathe in return. Valhalla stirred. The orchard bloomed. The silent choir hummed once more. All things once forgotten had been remembered, and the name at the center of it all, mine, rested gently among them, no longer searching, only shining. Above me, the windlight star burned steady in the sky. Below, I closed my eyes and listened.